We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph Mesechet Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 39a. And the previous Amud, the Gemara asked that if it's true according to Rabbi Meir that we find the kusim in terms of their money, so why is it that if a person rapes a woman who is a kusis, why do we say that the person pays the fine in that case? But we should say that there's a kanas against their money, and they shouldn't be able to collect the money. And Abaye answers, Shalo Yehei Chote Niskar. The reason over there why we make the person pay the fine is we don't want the sinner to be rewarded. But the Gemara says still, V'neis ve'li'aniyim. So the Gemara says still, he should have to pay the fine and let him give it to the poor. He won't give it to the kusis. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Mari says, Mishum dehavi mammon she'en lo tovim. The reason why he doesn't give it to the poor is because it would be that no particular poor person would really be able to claim it. As Rashi explains, Mishum dehavi mammon she'en lo tovim, it's like money that has no one to claim it. Iyamrit lahavi di'aniyim, if you said it belongs to the poor, Man osi tavale ladina. Who's the one? Which poor person is going to come and bring the person to court? Tavale ani. If a particular ani comes and claims it and says, "Give it to me," Amrle lani achar yehivnele. The person will just say, "I'll just give it to another ani," and therefore it'll be impossible to claim. And that's why essentially we give it to the kusis or to her father. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Shor shel pikeach shenagach shor shel cheresh shot of a katan. If a shore of a regular person gores the ox of a deaf mute, or a deranged person, or a minor, chayiv, so the pikeach is going to be chayiv to pay. V'shel cheresh shot of a katan, but the other way around, let's say the shore belongs to a cheresh shot of a katan, shenagach shor shel pikeach, and their shore gores the shore of a pikeach, so potter, so in that case they are going to be potter from paying from damages. They do not have das. And the Mishnah continues, Shor shel chereshot of a katan shenogach, if the shore of a chereshot of a katan gores, Bezin ma'amidin lahen apitropis, Bezin appoints someone to be the caretaker over their estate, u'mi'idin lahen b'fnei apitropis, and any testimony that takes place can happen in front of the apitropis. Rashi will explain, the Gemara will discuss as well. Nispakeach hacheresh, if the cheresh heals, nishtaf ha'ashota, or the deranged person heals, v'higdil ha'katan, or the katan grows up, now he's an adult, the halacha is chazer l'tamusa, that the animal, if it's a muad, it goes back to being a tam. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yossi says, hareu b'cheskaso, it stays in whatever status it is. If it's a muad, it remains a muad. And finally, the Mishnah says, Shor ha'itztadin, let's say you have an ox. This means to say that it's an ox that performs, it's trained to gore, eino chayav misa. So if it ends up killing, it's not going to be chayav misa like a regular shor. Shenemar, as it says, ki yigach, it says that it gores, below shiyagichu, but not that they're training it, that it should be able to gore. And Rashi explains, Shor shel cheresh and nagach, l'shor shel pikeach potter, if the shore of a cheresh, of a deaf mute, or it means a deranged person or a minor, any of those cases, if it gores the shore of a pikeach is potter, the Gemara mefarish, the Gemara explains as follows. De'ein ma'amidin apetropis l'tam ligvos migufa. If this animal we're talking about, the shore of the cheresh, let's say, if this animal is a tam, so we do not appoint an apetropis in terms of collecting the payment from the tam, because there you're collecting from the shore itself. That we don't do. Aval benizke muad, but let's say you have a situation where the animal is a muad and belongs to the cheresh. So there, ma'amidin apetropis l'shor hayisomim, there actually we would appoint an apetropis to be the caretaker over the ox of the orphans, lios b'makom habaylim, and he will stand in the place of the owners, l'kayim v'huad b'volav, that will fulfill the pasuk that you have to make the animal a muad in front of the owner. V'govim hanezik, and you actually would collect the damages, minichse hakarka shel yisomim, from the property of the yisomim. Avol tam, but when it comes to a tam, dikviyasom migufahu, where you're collecting from the tam itself, v'hu metaltalim, that's movable property, ein ma'amidin apetropis lakach, we do not set up an apetropis for that purpose. Kedamrina meparakam, like we say in the first parak, shava kesef malamed shein bezin is kokin elad nechosim sheyesh lem achrayis. It says shava kesef, it means bezin has to collect from property where there's a lien, meaning land. V'ukimna biasmi, and that we establish that it's referring to yisomim, to orphans. And Rashi continues, V'ika di'amar taima misham depalgan izka kenasa. Now, some people give a different reason why the Yisomim don't pay the Chatzi Nezek. They say the reason is because Chatzi Nezek is a knas, it's a fine. V'yasmi labene kenasa ninu, and the Yisomim, the orphans, don't have to pay fines. V'kashali, but Rashi says, that's difficult to me. Imkain my ligvos migufo denakat. If that's the case, why are we talking about collecting from the guf, from the actual animal? V'yod lekaman b'shmaitin amrinan b'muad l'man domer tzad tamas b'mekomo medis. Furthermore, we're going to say later on in the sugya by a muad, there's a mandomer that says that the part of the muad that is a tam stays in place. Eino nigvis min hayisomim haytaima. So it says if you hold that, you don't collect that from the yisomim for this reason. V'itaima misham kenasu. Now, if the reason is kanas and not because you're collecting from the animal itself, but muad may have a kanasu. By a muad, it certainly is not a kanas. It's only a kanas if it's actually a tam, not if it's a muad, but sad tamas b'mekom medis. Hala b'chezkas shimur kaimi. Again, a muad is not b'chezkas shimur, therefore it's certainly not going to be considered a knas. And Rashi continues, Umi'idin bohen b'fnei apotropos. It said again, you appoint an apotropos and you can testify in front of the apotropos. Now, right now, the Gemara initially is going to think that the Mishnah in this line means we testify in front of the apotropos and we collect chatzi nezek, meaning if it's a tam, and that of course would contradict what we just said. V'kasha reish l'seif, and now the beginning of the Mishnah would contradict the end of the Mishnah. Are we collecting the chatzi nezek or not in this situation? Ulachar shlosha edios nasa mu'ud mishalim nezek sholim eli, again after 3 times, so then it's going to become a mu'ud and it will pay nezek sholim. Chazar l'tamusa, then we had a machlokas in the Mishnah. Let's say the cotton grows up, or the cheresh, or the shota heals, so does it go back to being a tam again? So machlokas tanoim, Rabbi Meir said it goes back to being a tam, and Rabbi Yossi said the animal remains a mu'ud. Chazar l'tamusa, says Rashi, the kasavar rishus mishane. When we say chazar l'tamusa, according to Rabbi Meir, the reason is because when it changes to a new possession, to a new owner, that changes it, it goes back to being a tam, and this is considered like a new owner when the cotton grows up, etc. Mu'ud sheyatza merishus zev v'nichnas liyad bailam acherim. If a mu'ud leaves one owner and goes to another one, harishus mishane is din hada also. So then the fact that it changes possession, that changes the halacha in terms of it being a mu'ud. It now goes back to being a tam. Finally, shor ha'itztidin shemiyuchad l'negichos. Shor ha'itztidin means that it's trained to gore. Umelamdin oso lakach. We teach it to do that. Some translate shor ha'itztidin as the ox of the stadium. Again, the idea is that it's trained in that fashion. And the Gemara says, Hagufa Kasha, the Mishnah itself contradicts itself. This is the contradiction that Rashi just pointed out. Amrit shor shel cheresh shota v'katan shenagach shor shel pikach pater. First you say that the shor of a cheresh shota v'katan that gores the shor of a pikach is pater. Alma, so what do we see from that? Ein ma'amid an apotropos l'tam ligvos migufa. That we don't appoint an apotropos for an animal that's a tam to collect from the animal itself when we're talking about the animal belonging to a cheresh shota v'katan. Ein maseifa, but let's look at the end of the Mishnah. Shor shel cheresh shota v'katan shenagach. It says of a shore of a cheresh shota v'katan gores, bezin ma'amidin lohem apotropos umeidin lohem b'fnei apotropos. It says bezin does appoint an apotropos, and we do testify in front of the apotropos. Alma ma'amidin lohem apotropos l'tam ligvos migufa. We see that we do appoint an apotropos for an animal that's a tam, again when it belongs to a cheresh shota v'katan, to collect from the animal itself. Seems to contradict the other line in the Mishnah. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava, Rava says, Hachi Katani, this is how we understand the Mishnah. V'im huchzaku nagchonin. If you have the animal now that is established that it gores, so it's considered to be a mu'ud, so then ma'amidin lohem apotropos, then we do appoint an apotropos, u'mi'idin lohen b'fnei apotropos, and we testify in front of the apotropos, u'mashvinon lehu mu'ud, we officially render the animal a mu'ud, techihader v'nagach l'shalem me'aliyah. Then if it gores again, they're going to pay the full amount from me'aliyah, meaning from the best property, as the Gemara will now say, from the best property, either of the Yisomim or the apotropos. The Gemara now asks, me'aliyas man, from the best property, whose property? Who has to pay for this? In the situation of a mu'ud, it's a machlokas amoroim. Rabbi Yochanan Amar me'aliyas Yisomin. Rabbi Yochanan says it's from the best property of the orphans themselves. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina Amar me'aliyas apotropos. And Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says it's from the best property of the apotropos. And the Gemara continues, Umiyamar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi, does Rabbi Yochanan really say that we pay from the property of the Yisomim? V'yamar Rav Yehuda Amar Ravasi, but Rav Yehuda said that Ravasi said, Ein is kakin l'nichsei Yisomim. We do not collect from the property of Yisomim. Elim kain ribis ochelas behan. The only time we do that is, let's say there's a loan and there's interest being collected on that loan. That interest is going to continue to grow. That can completely consume the property, the inheritance of the Yisomim. So then we actually do go to the property of the Yisomim and pay off the loan, so that no more ribis is collected. For Rabbi Yochanan Amar, and Rabbi Yochanan says, O l'shtar sheyesh bo ribis. There are actually 2 scenarios that we will collect from Yisomim. Either the first one, what we just said, if there's a shtar with ribis, we don't want there to be too much interest collected to consume all of their estate. O l'chsubas isha, or a similar idea by the ksuba of a woman, because until she collects, mishum mezoni, because you have to give her mezona, so you have to provide for her support until she collects the ksuba, so it's better to just collect the ksuba from the property of the Yisomim. But you see, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that in general, we don't collect from the property of the Yisomim. And Rashi explains, Ein is kakin bezin l'nichsei Yisomim. Again, bezin doesn't take the property from the Yisomim, ligvos mehem klum, to collect anything from them. Ve'afilu shtar shekos v'avim, even if it's a shtar their father wrote, kid mefarish taima b'Mesechet zerchen. The reason it's given in Mesechet zerchen, the yasmi lav b'nei mevad mitzvah ninu, because of the Yisomim, they don't have to do this mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to pay off these debts of their father, but they don't have to do the mitzvah. Elanatar adagali, we wait until they get older, until they're adults. Umafkile, then we take it. V'gavi, then we collect. V'hasam osvinon lei kama tiyufta. Over there, they ask a number of questions. B'shaninu b'shtar sheyesh bo ribis, and they end up answering that by a shtar that has ribis, that has interest, that that's different. And Rashi continues, Elim kein ribis ochelas ben, unless again there is interest, shalava avian minochri beribis, meaning to say their father borrowed from a non-Jew with interest, and then we're afraid they might lose a lot of money. Umochrim bezin minichsein uporno sochov, then bezin will sell from their property and pay up the debt. Similarly, mishum mizoni, for the mizonos by a wife, shekals man shalo yinu laksuba, as long as you don't give her the ksuba, nizonas mishalahem. So then she's going to be supported, she'll get mizonos, and again that can be a great loss of money. And so the Gemara continues and answers, Epoch, you have to reverse it. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Me'aliyas Apetropis, and it's actually Rabbi Yochanan who says you collect from the best property of the Apetropis, not from the Yisomim, because we said, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you don't collect from Yisomim. And Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanino Amar Me'aliyas Yisomim, it's Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanino who says you collect from the best property of the orphans. But the Gemara still doesn't like this. Amar Rava says, Mishum Dekasha, to Rabbi Yochanan, just because you have a contradiction in Rabbi Yochanan, Ma'ashvis Leila Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina Toa, you're going to make it that Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina is in error, because it's obvious the halach is you don't collect from Yisomim, so it can't be Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said that either. For Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina Dayanahu, but Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina rather is a judge, as Rashi says, Dayanahu is a judge. V'lo kamar dinis kaken l'nichsei Yisomim. He wouldn't say that we take away from the property of the orphans. V'nachis lumkei dedina. He went down to the depths of the halacha. He knew the halacha. And so the Gemara says, Ella rather, liolam lo sepach, really don't reverse it. Umazik shani, in a situation where you're paying for damage, that's different. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Me'aliyas Yisomim, Rabbi Yochanan says in that case you do collect from the best property of the orphans. The Amrit Me'aliyas Apetropis, because if you're going to say that we collect from the best property of the Apetropis, that's going to pose a problem, as we will see in the next video. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Tes Amud Beis.